speaker is Jodie Emery, and really, I don't think she needs an introduction. Now I'd like to invite Veronica up to the stage. She's the former president of the UBC Objectivist Club. She's going to introduce you to Jodie, and I'm going to unmute that.
So here's just a little bit more of a formal introduction to Jodie Emery. Jodie Emery is a longtime cannabis advocate, political activist, and public speaker based right here in Vancouver. As owner of cannabis culture stores and vapor lounges, cannabisculture.com and Pot TV, she regularly appears in mainstream and alternative media. Additionally, she has completed 4 political election campaigns. Jodie is married to Mark Emery, the famous Prince of Pot, who donated millions of dollars for marijuana seed sales to global legalization efforts and was released from U.S. prison in 2014 after serving 5 years for his activism. Please help me in welcoming Jodie Emery.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me. And it's very exciting because I guess I don't like labels, so I don't want to say I'm a libertarian, because then a bunch of people suddenly imagine me in a way that I don't even understand, because I haven't really read any books. The most I've gotten into it was reading Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead years and years ago, and that kind of changed my mind about the way I thought about the world. But even further back, when I was in high school, I was actually against marijuana. I was against drugs and drinking and anything fun that teenagers did, I was kind of against and opposed to. Teacher's pet, authoritarian. I love seeing people in uniform, marching. Like, I don't know, somehow I'm a Star Wars fan and I loved the good side, but I really thought that the Empire looked slick, you know, like all matching uniforms, lockstep. I'm like, I want to lead that kind of group. But then my friends introduced me to cannabis culture and Pot TV. And even though I gave them a very hard time about being so stupid that they'd smoke pot, they may as well just go kill themselves now because it's that insane to do, they helped me get educated through media and through Mark Emery's online video network, Pot TV, one of the first video websites ever on the internet. In the year 2000 it was launched, and Cannabis Culture magazine. And when I decided to finally try smoking pot, it blew my mind, not, you know, because I got high, but because I realized how much I'd been lied to, that, you know, I was told marijuana was bad, and then I realized it wasn't, and that made me question what else isn't true that I've been told. And then 9/11 happened, and then there was all this talk about oil wars and military-industrial complex and all sorts of things that, you know, I'm a teenager in grade 10 going into grade 11. I was in grade 11 when 9/11 happened, and I just had, you know, that's a time when your mind is really developing, a lot of new ideas are coming in. And so I started to question authority a lot. And when I moved to Vancouver here in 2004, it was to become a marijuana activist, to work for Mark Emery. But even at that time, I was still of the mindset that, you know, marijuana legalization is good, but use all the police resources to arrest the other drug users. You know, go after the people who use coke or heroin. So I hadn't yet developed my thinking far enough to realize that, you know, beyond marijuana being a safe substance that helps people live their lives and saves lives, it's wrong for government to tell you what you can and cannot do with your own body. And over time I came to that realization, and that's how I moved on to being an anti-prohibitionist, meaning that I think all drugs should be legal. I think that prohibition is a failed policy with respect to drugs and prostitution and other issues too. Not to say that if we ended the prohibition on murder, everybody would be like, yippee, oh, I was just waiting for that to happen. Let me go get an axe and start getting to it. Like, you know, the law isn't stopping people from using drugs or engaging in prostitution, and it doesn't even stop people from murdering. That's usually a crime of passion. But really my mind about liberty and libertarian ideas opened up in 2006. A guy named Ron Paul was in the US Congress, and my husband, Mark Emery, decided to take it upon himself to do an election issue in our Cannabis Culture magazine when it was print. And the election issue had basically a review of every member of Congress. You can imagine. Mark went through every member of Congress, all of their voting records on issues from the drug war, to the hemp bills, to the Patriot Act, and all sorts of issues related to war and liberty and the drug war. And he created a ranking system. And the person who came out on top for the liberty of the marijuana movement was this Ron Paul guy, a Republican from Texas, a white male Republican from Texas. And to tell the marijuana movement that that's who we should get behind was not an easy task, as you can imagine. The marijuana movement was very left-wing leaning, but that's when I started to think, it doesn't matter what your label is. Do you believe in liberty or not? Do you believe in government having control of your life or not? And a phrase that I keep coming up with when I thought of government and what they do, I figured it's, government is basically there to stop you from doing things you do want to do and make you do things you don't want to do. And that the idea of government to me started to really, it bothered me. It was this idea that not only are you ostracized for believing something like marijuana should be legal, but marijuana prohibition has been used by authoritarian groups, by governments overseas, to control population. Marijuana prohibition is a massive civil rights violation, and this goes really deep. And right now, everyone's excited about legalization and Justin Trudeau, and things are changing in Washington State, Colorado. There's so much happening, I can't even keep on top of all the law reform that's taking place. But when I started activism in 2004, it was really difficult to come out and argue in favor of legalization. It was not as easy as it is today. And today, it's impossible to find someone to debate in favor of prohibition. And that started changing about 2 years ago. I started getting fewer and fewer opportunities to debate it. Everyone agreed. It never used to be like that. And what we found over time was that it didn't matter if you're a libertarian or socialist or communist or whatever, people smoke pot. And everybody knows someone who smokes pot. And there's probably people with ideologies I don't agree with, but they consume marijuana. And they don't really realize how much marijuana prohibition affects their daily life and affects the civil liberties of all citizens, even those who don't use marijuana. So prohibition has been used to justify a massive growth in the prison complex, the industrial prison complex, private prisons, for-profit prisons. It's led to police having powers of surveillance and the ability to detain people on ridiculous reasons, and prohibition has taken away people's freedoms even when they don't get arrested and go to prison. I made a little list because I'm trying to think of all the ways that marijuana prohibition violates people's civil liberties and ruins lives. And it's quite a lot. In the first place, if you do get arrested, that's a criminal record, and it will follow you forever. And many people, especially in the United States, a lot of young people cannot get a scholarship. And if they are in school, post-secondary education, they're going to be expelled or suspended. They can lose their scholarships. People in Canada lose their right to travel to the United States. Even young people, like recently here in Vancouver, there was a news story about a religious family on the North Shore or West Vancouver, I forget exactly where, but this young girl wanted to go volunteer to work with the homeless with a church group in the United States. And she couldn't go because at some point in her history, she was hanging out with some friends, a cop approached them, did not find marijuana, didn't arrest them, didn't charge them, but made a note that they had had an interaction because of a suspicion that marijuana was being used. That was like long ago for this girl in high school, and now she's graduated and she wants to help the homeless, and she can't because not even an arrest, not even a conviction, but because of an interaction where marijuana was kind of an issue and wasn't even actually found. So she was unable to go to the US. A lot of people are unable to travel. A lot of people can't get jobs. And if you do get a job, oftentimes they're going to want you to pee in a cup because they want to know if you're using marijuana. Cocaine and other drugs will disappear pretty quick in your system, so the drug testing out in the oil fields and all that, it won't really catch those who are engaging in hard drugs. Not that there's a problem if they're using drugs in their own time, it doesn't impact their work, whatever, have at it. But the drug testing industry, which continues to grow and expand in a lot of different fields, beyond actual workers dealing with dangerous machinery, the drug testing industry is growing, and it's not looking for people who are doing a poor job. It's not looking for people who are dangerous. It's looking for people who choose to consume a substance in their own time. and then choosing to punish them and deprive them of their ability to feed their families and pay their rent and contribute to society because of something they do in their own time. There's nothing like that for alcohol. They aren't going around and finding people who drink and telling them that they can't work. If you're drunk on the job, you're probably going to get in trouble. If you show up to work totally blitzed out on brownies, you probably should not be doing that and you might get in trouble too. But if you use marijuana in your own personal time, you shouldn't be made to suffer for that. But we've seen other ways that people pay the price for marijuana prohibition, in terms of not just losing their jobs, but forever being ostracized. Maybe nowadays we're seeing a shift, so more and more people are comfortable with pot, but even as recently as 5 years ago, if you came out and said you used marijuana, or you came to a pot rally, or you wrote a letter to a newspaper saying it should be legal, you might have somebody call you into their office and say, listen, you can't do that. You're making us look bad. So you have to be quiet in the closet if you want to use marijuana, because people might start thinking that you're a certain type of bad person. Even though everybody knows someone who smokes pot, including professionals like Ted Turner and Richard Branson and Obama himself and Justin Trudeau, pot smokers, all of them. And great musicians and performers and the people who brought us Apple, these people all use pot. But marijuana continues to be a stigma that results in people losing a lot of their liberty and their lives. People lose their kids because of cannabis. People have had their children taken away because there are plants growing in a house. And even if it's being done safely, these children are being taken away. Parents who are being tested positive for marijuana after they give birth, if a mother uses marijuana for nausea, they take kids away. This happened just the other day in the US. It's happening all the time. You have not just the restrictions for people to travel, but even driving. We're starting to see a lot of questions about driving under the influence and whether you should punish people for that. And people in Washington State who use marijuana are very concerned about losing their ability to drive, which can take away their ability to work and engage in society because of marijuana and their decision to use it. We're also seeing people lose their houses through asset forfeiture. Asset forfeiture is incredibly unjust. It's incredibly despicable, in my opinion, that they create a government group, an agency that is funded by the stealing of citizens' property. And it's not even taking property from people convicted of a crime. People who have been accused of growing marijuana have to prove that they bought everything without illegal proceeds. And if they can't, they can lose their home without even being charged and convicted and found guilty. That's happening in British Columbia. That is a gross injustice because marijuana is not dangerous. And the fact that these agencies and these civil asset forfeiture offices are being funded by seizing property, it's just going to continue to look for more and more people to take from. And if you said you were going to take away property from everybody convicted of drunk driving, can you imagine the outrage? It goes so deep, the way that people's rights are violated. And beyond even, say you don't smoke pot, you don't know anybody who does, you've never had to pay a price in any way, shape, or form, but you have, in your tax dollars. How many people are upset about the rising tax rates, rising fees for MSPs and BC Hydro and everything, the taxes just keep piling up? Well, that money is being used for policing and law enforcement. And if you move beyond pot, did you know that 75% of federal court resources and time in this country, of Canada, 75% is spent on drug cases? And the majority of drug cases is marijuana related. Marijuana grow-ops, marijuana distribution, trafficking. That's a lot of money being wasted. A lot of our tax dollars being wasted and abused and misused. And yet they dare come and ask for even more tax money to pay for the things we aren't getting, like appropriate health care and actual choices. That to me is offensive, because even if you want all the pot people to be punished, do you really want to see your tax dollars being used to do so when you're waiting months and months just to get a scan to make sure that you're not dying? I mean, there are a lot of parts of our society that are suffering for lack of funds, a lack of attention, and marijuana prohibition is sucking away valuable tax dollars that should be used for much more important issues. And as a side note, marijuana is a safe substance that's helping save people's lives and can reduce the cost to society through alcohol abuse, prescription pain pills, and a lot of the harmful things going on in society. So marijuana, if it were legal, could actually save us tax dollars in terms of healthcare costs and the loss of jobs and employment from other things that are more addictive and harmful. One of the other dangerous things that marijuana prohibition has done is allowed police to violate our civil liberties and privacy. Police are able to spy on cell phones and set up surveillance without the same sort of rules that would apply for other cases. Some of the most disgusting things I've heard about marijuana prohibition out of the United States, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen in Canada, are instances where a driver does not stop completely at a stop sign, cop pulls them over, suspects them of marijuana, doesn't find any marijuana, but forces these citizens to be searched in their anus and their vagina for marijuana on the roadside. This has happened. This has happened where citizens are pulled out of their vehicles and sexually assaulted to search for marijuana, which isn't even found and doesn't even exist at the site of the scene of the crime. That stuff happens, and it's a disgusting abuse of police powers, and it goes to make citizens lose their trust and faith in authority. And that's what happened to me when I started realizing I'd been lied to. You know, I have an aunt and uncle in Alberta, RCMP officers. My mother's father was RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But suddenly I didn't trust police. And when you realize that they're being forced to carry out the enforcement of something so unjust, it makes you not really willing to go to them for help in other ways. So marijuana prohibition has actually helped erode the public trust in police. And that's dangerous for everybody because it creates a gap of them versus us. And police have killed people over marijuana. People have been shot and killed, and shot and injured, and had their pets shot by cops and murdered right in front of them. And that's because of marijuana prohibition. And I can go on and on about how people, you know, their criminal record haunts them forever. And we're moving into a period of time where legalization is happening, and you know, down in the U.S., you know, you might go for a drive right across Washington State border. You can see Mount Baker. You can see land where people can be smoking pot legally, while here in Canada, you can be arrested and punished severely in ways that will violate your liberties for a long time to come. And so, while we move forward with exciting times and exciting changes and more freedom for a lot of people, I am here to be like, you know, the wet blanket, kind of like, yo guys, it's not so good because bad things are still happening. And we need to remember that there are people who have paid the price and are still paying the price for violating the laws of marijuana prohibition. There are people in prison today whose kids are visiting them today. And when I was visiting the U.S. down in Mississippi and in Georgia, I was visiting my husband, Mark Emery, in those federal prisons, and I was privileged and lucky enough to have a business and a support base to let me go see him. But when I was down there, you know, I would visit with families with little kids who were going to see their dad. Their dad was there because he smuggled pot. And seeing these children showing up, going through metal detectors, watching their mom get pat down, you know, going through these big metal sliding doors with barbed wire all around, and it's not a nice environment. And to look at these children and say, wow, these ones are the lucky ones. These kids are lucky because they actually get to see their daddy. You know, these are the children who are able to at least go and hug their dad. Many children, when they go visit their parents in prison, they're for pot or drug violations of some kind. Some of them have to go through a screen or a glass wall. Many other ones are done through video conferencing. I had to do a video visit in Seattle with Mark one time, and it's horrible. You don't actually make eye contact because you're looking up at the camera or looking at the screen, and it's not them. They're looking at it. It's tearing apart families is what I'm getting at here. And when I see these little children trying so hard not to cry when they say goodbye, and seeing their mother weeping, and these little 5-year-old kids being like, Mommy, don't cry, and they're trying not to cry, and I'm like, wow, these are the lucky ones, because they get to see their dad. Many other children will not see their parents, and that creates a terrible cycle in the Black community and white community and in every community of children without parents. And these children are more likely to have interactions with police and the criminal justice system because their parents were taken away. So when I look at those kids and the stats they tell prisoners, that 70% of kids who have a parent in prison, they're going to be in prison or in handcuffs themselves. It's really depressing to look at those kids in that visiting room and think, one day you're going to be in here. because they put your dad in here, because they didn't allow him to pay his debts to society in whatever other way. That's creating a new generation of lesser citizens who won't have the same rights and abilities because they'll be criminalized. And that's why prohibition needs to end, and not just marijuana prohibition, but all drug prohibition. And it's nice to see in the United States right now, Obama, for all his flaws or benefits or whatever, he's just a guy, he's a leader of a country, but he's actually doing things that make me happy, like letting 6,000 federal inmates out of prison for nonviolent drug crimes. Little steps like that, little things like that, little things like telling the DEA to back off from states that have legalized marijuana or medical marijuana, you know, allowing veterans to use medical marijuana for PTSD, allowing pharmaceutical companies to explore the anti-tumor properties of cannabinoids. There's so much information, so much going on out there, and we're seeing a rapid move towards a more accepting policies towards marijuana. But as we move forward, we need to remember there are still people who have paid the ultimate price. There are still hundreds of thousands of people behind bars. There are still communities that have been torn apart by having families separated because of marijuana prohibition. And when we move forward into coming up with new policies about marijuana, I mean, it is exciting as an activist that I don't have to be in the street with a sign anymore saying prohibition funds organized crime. Like, people get it now after all these years of activism and marching in the streets and protesting and debating. Everyone's pretty much on board. Is anyone here against legalization? Maybe you are. I'm not going to hate on you for it. See, it's like hippie, right? That's as much as we're getting these days. And there used to be a time where it was like, you want it legal? Oh my goodness, why? But now people are more in favor because it's not so much about, oh, I want it legal so we can all buy it and smoke it and have it. It's because we know that prohibition as a policy is not working. And when we heard the speakers talking about strange bedfellows, and for me it's been fun because in my activism career, it is mostly left-wing type people, I guess you could call them. I hate that left-right thing anyway. It's more like a big circle where communism and fascism kind of tie up at the top. But you know, it's when you have these lefty types and then your righty types. A lot of activists would say to me, Jodie, don't go on Sun News. That's like Fox News North. And, you know, don't go talk to the conservative groups or whatever. You know, those people are like extremists. And I said, why would you turn down the opportunity to speak to any audience? Why would you ever turn down the opportunity to speak to people who agree and disagree with you to try and get them thinking about different ideas? I mean, it worked for me. Otherwise, I'd be standing here saying authority and keep it illegal like I did in high school. But I was able to change my mind through education, and because I've heard enough arguments and discussions about it, that I was able to change positions. So that's why I don't, you know, cast out anyone who doesn't agree with me. I went on Sun News year after year before they got shut down, unfortunately, but Sun News, or Fox News North, they call it, had me on a lot. And I spoke to that audience because I knew that they were receptive, because when it comes to liberty and government and big government and taxation and excessive regulation and all that, I knew that the right wing would be on our side. And we're seeing a lot more of that in the United States. We're seeing bipartisan efforts to end prohibition, because even in the right-wing pro-life groups, of which I wouldn't identify with myself personally, but I went to Dallas-Fort Worth and I spoke at a conference, and there were Republicans against marijuana prohibition, RAMP. And they spoke about how being pro-life meant being pro-life after birth, about being pro-life for those kids whose parents are put away, about being pro-life for those children who suffer epilepsy, who are clearly having their lives improved by marijuana medicine. I mean, this is where the right wing decided to come on board. They said, yeah, you know what, big government is bad, and marijuana prohibition and the drug war is very much a big government. And like I said before, they've used marijuana prohibition and the drug war to justify the paramilitarization of police groups. That they have these SWAT raids going on every single day over marijuana. And that continues, this massive encroachment of the creeping jackboots, my husband once said. You know, this authoritarian state of controlling you has been growing thanks to marijuana prohibition and the drug war, the ability to spy on people and to justify that sort of intrusion. Marijuana prohibition and the drug war have been very useful for authoritarians and for oppressors. And you see it in countries overseas where they continue to have national days. There's a day around the world where countries execute drug smugglers. They have a big public celebration, people come out, and they kill them. And that's celebrated. And meanwhile, we have substances like alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs and tobacco and sugar and fatty food. There's a lot of things out there that are dangerous. And I would often say to people, well, even if you don't think marijuana is safe, even if you think marijuana is deadly dangerous, how is the law making it safer? How does making it illegal make it safe? It doesn't. It allows teenagers to buy it from their friends, it puts gardens into basements, and allows organized crime to profit off of a product. They don't care what it is. If dandelions were illegal, they would move into that. But marijuana is illegal, and that's profitable. Prohibition creates inflated prices. Prohibition created the drug problem, the drug war problem. And politicians who support prohibition are supporting organized crime. That's one of my first slogans I had at a protest against Harper years ago, and it got around there a lot. Until some Workers United of the World, a socialist group, took my photo and put their own message on the sign, and people were like, what? That's not right. Jodie Emery would never say that. You know, like, I'm like, wow, I've become a meme for left-wingers, socialist groups. I think it was like when somebody says they get rich off of hard work, ask them whose. And I thought, well, that's an interesting concept, probably the hard workers. But anyway, I digress. But when it comes to marijuana prohibition, everybody's on board that it's a failed policy. But the question now is what kind of legalization system will we have? And one of my biggest concerns, even though I did join the Liberal Party because they support legalization, I did seek the nomination, and I sure held Trudeau's feet to the fire, and I gave him a lot of talking points through my media about why marijuana is not an issue to be afraid of. But during all that campaigning, I wanted to emphasize, and I still emphasize, that freedom of choice is tantamount. When we move to legalize marijuana, it cannot be moved into a monopolized system where the competition is criminalized through excessive regulation. I'm all in favor of licensed providers growing massive amounts of medical marijuana and sending it to patients, but not if they're going to do it by shutting down the dispensaries. I'm in favor of everybody having an opportunity to participate, because a true free market, which marijuana could hopefully demonstrate to people what a true free market is, it's where the market of supply and demand will dictate how much there is. Right now we have 200 dispensaries in Vancouver. Well, it's not because nobody wants them. Clearly there's enough demand to supply for 200 dispensaries, and there's even more demand. But when we move into legalization, we're going to see a lot of calls for monopolies, for specialized controls, for particular groups getting an advantage over the other. But my job in the years ahead is no longer to say, here's why we need to legalize it. It's going to be, here's why we need to legalize with as few restrictions as possible. Washington State's negative example is that they put in the taxes are too high, it's government controlled, the DUI, the driving restrictions are not scientifically valid, and they admitted it. They only included them to get the vote support. And I was a member of that campaign. I did work to pass that law, even though I knew it wasn't perfect. Because you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You can't be waiting until we can reach the promised land of liberty for all. I guarantee you women did not say, we'll just wait for the right to vote until we get full equal pay or whatever, right? You know, you didn't have the anti-slavery movement saying, we'll just keep that in place until black man's in the White House. You know, that did not happen because everybody knows justice and liberty, those are battles that are incrementally fought. Even today, people are still fighting for the alcohol and beer laws and all of that to change. It's not illegal, alcohol is not illegal, but the rules vary place by place, and there's always an effort to try and change them. So Ron Paul, back to him, one of my first heroes. He inspired me. I don't know everything he believes in, but he inspired me because he spoke truth to power. He was genuine and authentic, and he said there are 3 ways to make a difference. 1 is education, 2, political action or engagement, and 3, peaceful civil disobedience, where you accept the consequences. And I've done as much as I can on all those fronts to try and make a difference. And we're finally seeing more and more people come on board about legalization, but I hope they'll also realize in time that liberty and legalization can go hand in hand and demonstrate how we can be free from government oppression and free from restrictive controls and have an actual market of marijuana that provides for this demand that exists. And hopefully we'll be able to have the best form of legalization possible. And it's a good first step to stop arresting people. I'll take that, and then take what you can get and always ask for more. Thanks so much for listening.